Hello everyone, this is Aaron from MTGChallengers and welcome to another Magic the Gathering highlights video. For today's match, we have Matthew playing Abzan Graveyard going up against Alex playing Temur Monsters. Matthew won the die roll and started things off by scrying with a Temple of Malady. He chose to leave the card on top. Alex played a Wooded Foothills and passed the turn. Matthew laid down a Plains and cast a Satyr Wayfinder. This allowed him to reveal the top 4 cards of his library and get a Sandstep Citadel into his hand, sending the rest to the grave. Alex went to 19 at the end of his turn, cracking his Foothills and fetched up a Forest. For his next turn, he played a Shivan Reef and resolved a Sylvan Caryatid. Matthew played a Sandstep Citadel, which entered tapped and cast a Commune with the Gods. Of the top 5, he chose to get a Sylvan Caryatid into his hand and put the rest in the yard. Alex laid down a second Foothills and immediately cracked it, getting himself a Mountain. He then cast a Savage Knuckleblade. He gave it haste and swung in for 4. Matthew chose to chump it with his Wayfinder. He played a Forest and a Sylvan Caryatid of his own on his next turn. He then delved 4 lands out of his grave and cast a Murderous Cut, destroying the Knuckleblade. Alex cast another Sylvan Caryatid and followed it up with a Rattleclaw Mystic. He then played a Temple of Abandon, sending the top card to the bottom. Matthew scryed for himself with a Temple of Plenty on his next turn and also chose to send the top card to the bottom. He cast a Whip of Erebos before passing the turn. Alex resolved a Sarkhan the Dragon Speaker and used his +1 ability to make him a 4/4 indestructible flying dragon with haste. He sent him to the red zone, dropping Matthew to 16. On his next turn, Matthew activated the Whip's ability, returning an Ashen Rider to the battlefield and giving it haste. When it entered, he was able to exile Sarkhan and swing in for 5, dropping Alex to 12, and Matthew gained 5 life himself from the lifelink, going up to 21. After combat, Matthew cast another Commune with the Gods. He got another Caryatid into his hand. He then passed the turn back, exiling the Ashen Rider. Alex laid down a Yavimaya Coast as his land for turn and resolved a Stormbreath Dragon. He swung in with it along with his Mystic for 6, taking Matthew to 15. Matthew cast another Caryatid. He then whipped back a Hornet Queen from his grave, getting himself 4 1/1 flying Death Touch insects. He swung for 2 with the Queen, which had haste, taking Alex to 10 and Matthew up to 17. Alex activated Stormbreath's Monstrosity on his next turn, giving it 3 +1/+1 counters and dealing 4 damage to Matthew. He chose to only swing in with the Mystic this turn, which Matthew chose to trade with one of his tokens. Matthew hard casted another Hornet Queen on his next turn, getting himself 4 more tokens. He chose to pass the turn without attacking. Alex resolved another Savage Knuckleblade. He then killed the Hornet Queen with a Magma Jet, allowing him to scry 2. He chose to leave 1 card on top and send the other to the bottom. He gave his Knuckleblade haste and swung in with it, trading with another insect. Matthew cast a Siege Rhino on his next turn, taking himself up to 18 and Alex down to 7. He cast another Commune, getting himself another Whip. He swung for 2, which Alex chose to take. Alex played a Polykranos World Eater on his next turn and passed it back. Matthew cast a See the Unwritten with a Ferocious trigger on it. Unfortunately for him, an Elvish Mystic was the only creature in the top 8 cards which he put onto the field. He then swung out with his Rhino and tokens for a total of 10 damage. Alex blocked one of the tokens with his Dragon. He then triple blocked the Rhino with the rest of his creatures. Before damage, he activated Polykranos' Monstrosity for 1, knocking off one of the tokens and gaining Matthew a life. Damage was dealt, Alex took 4 going down to 1 life, and Matthew gained another 9 going up to 30. Alex cast a Rattleclaw Mystic and passed the turn back. Matthew resolved another Rhino, finishing Alex off and taking them to game 2. Welcome to Game 2. Alex was on the play and scryed with a Temple of Mystery on his first turn. He chose to keep the card on top. Matthew played a Swamp and cast a Thoughtseize, forcing Alex to reveal his hand. Of the 6 cards, he chose to get rid of a Disdainful Stroke, losing 2 life. Alex laid down a Shivan Reef and resolved a Sylvan Caryatid. Matthew just scryed with a Temple of Plenty on his next turn, leaving the card on top. Alex played a Yavimaya Coast and tapped out for a Polykranos World Eater. Matthew played a Windswept Heath and paid a life to immediately crack it, getting himself a Forest. He then cast an Elvish Mystic, followed by a Sylvan Caryatid of his own. Alex played a Wooded Foothills and cast a Rattleclaw Mystic. He then went to 19 to crack the Foothills and fetched a Mountain. He chose to activate Polykranos' Monstrosity for 1, giving him a +1/+1 counter and knocking off Matthew's Elvish Mystic. He then swung in with it for 6, which Matthew chose to take, going down to 11. Matthew laid down a second Temple of Plenty, sending the top card to the bottom this time. He then cast a Siege Rhino, gaining himself 3 life, going to 14, and taking 3 life from Alex, going to 16. Alex played another Temple of Mystery, sending the card to the bottom. He then swung in for 6 with Polykranos again. Matthew chose to chump him with his Rhino. He laid down an Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth as his land for turn. He then resolved an Elspeth Sun's Champion. He used her -3 ability to destroy all creatures with power 4 or greater, getting rid of Polykranos. At the end of his turn, Alex flashed in a Sirach Dragonclaw. He scryed again with a Temple of Abandon, sending it to the bottom. Matthew was totally open, so Alex swung his Rattleclaw Mystic at Elspeth for 2, killing her, and sent Sirach at Matthew, taking him down to 8. In post-combat, Alex cast an Ilea's Disciple, gaining him 5 life. Matthew just played a Sandstep Citadel, which entered tapped and passed the turn. Alex went straight into combat on his next turn, swinging in for 11 with everything he could. Matthew chumped Sirach with his Caryatid and took the other 5, going down to 3. Matthew was able to kill Sirach with a Hero's Downfall on his next turn. However, he didn't draw anything to stay alive, and Alex was able to swing in for lethal on his next turn, giving him the win and taking them to Game 3. Welcome to Game 3. Matthew took the play and laid down a Windswept Heath. He then fetched with it, going to 19 and got himself a forest. He cast an Elvish Mystic and passed the turn. Alex laid down a Temple of Abandon, scrying, and chose to leave a card on top. Matthew scryed for himself with a Temple of Malady on his next turn and also left the card on top. He then cast a Sylvan Caryatid. Alex just played a Shivan Reef and passed the turn. Matthew played a Swamp and cast a Whip of Erebos. Alex chose to go down to 19 for blue mana to counter the whip with a Disdainful Stroke. Matthew poked Alex for 1 with his Elvish Mystic, taking him to 18. Alex played a Mountain. He then cast an Anger of the Gods, wiping the board. Matthew played a Sandstep Citadel, which entered tapped, and cast a Satyr Wayfinder. Of the top 4 cards, he got a Swamp into his hand and sent the others to the grave. Alex just played a Yavimaya Coast and passed it back. Matthew played another Citadel and cast another Elvish Mystic. He hit Alex for 1 with his Wayfinder, taking him to 17. At the end of Matthew's turn, Alex cast a Magma Jet, killing the Mystic and allowing him to scry 2. He chose to keep both cards on top. He just played a Forest and passed. Matthew played another Caryatid and swung for 1 with his Wayfinder. In response, Alex flashed in a Sirach Dragonclaw, costing him a life. He then used it to block and kill the Satyr. Alex played a Wooded Foothills and swung for 6 with Sirach. Matthew chose to take the damage, going down to 13. Matthew played a Plains. He then delved 2 lands out of his yard and cast a Murderous Cut, killing Sirach. At the end of his turn, Alex cast another Magma Jet, taking Matthew to 11. He kept 1 card on top and sent the other to the bottom from the scry 2. He cast a Polykranos World Eater and passed the turn. Matthew responded on his turn with a Hornet Queen, getting himself 4 1/1 insects with flying and death touch. Alex played another Temple of Abandon, scrying the top card to the bottom. He then cast another Anger of the Gods, clearing Matthew's board. He swung in for 5, which Matthew had to take, going to 6. Matthew top-decked a Banishing Light on his next turn, which he used to exile Polykranos. Alex resolved a Ilea's Disciple, gaining himself 2 life, and laid down a second Wooded Foothills. Matthew cast a See the Unwritten, revealing the top 8 cards of his library. Another Hornet Queen was among them, allowing him to put it onto the battlefield and get another round of tokens. Alex cast a Xenagos the Reveler. He used his 0 ability to make a 2/2 red and green Satyr token with haste and then swung in with it. Matthew traded for it with 1 of his insects. He killed Xenagos with a Hero's Downfall on his next turn. He then swung with his Hornet Queen and a token for 3, which Alex had to take, going to 15. Alex just drew his card and passed. Matthew resolved a Siege Rhino, taking 3 life from Alex and gaining 3 himself. He then hit for another 3 with his Queen and a token, tying them up at 9. Alex played another Yavimaya Coast and cast a Rattleclaw Mystic. On Matthew's next combat, he swung with his Hornet Queen and a token, along with his Rhino. Alex double-blocked the Rhino, killing all of the creatures, and took another 3, going down to 6. Matthew followed it up with a Land War Wastes and passed the turn. Alex drew and passed again. Matthew attempted to resolve another Siege Rhino on his next turn, but Alex was able to counter it with a Disdainful Stroke. Unfortunately, his only source of blue mana cost him a life, which allowed Matthew to fly over for exactly lethal, giving him the win to the game and the match. So that's it for these highlights. If you enjoyed them, feel free to check out the full gameplay as well. To see the lists for these decks and others, be sure to check out our deck techs and like the Facebook page for announcements, updates, and other behind-the-scenes information. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, subscribe for more Magic the Gathering content.